Audiobook present Your Invisible Power for Genevieve Behrend. Ask, believe that you have received, and you shall receive. Prologue. These pages have been written with the purpose and hope that their suggestions may provide you with the key to open the way to the attainment of your desires, and to explain that fear must be totally banished from your effort to gain possession of the things you want. This presupposes, of course, that your desire for possession is based on your aspiration for greater freedom. For example, you feel that the possession of more money, land, or friends will make you happier, and your desire for the possession of these things arises from the conviction that their possession will bring you freedom and happiness. In your effort to possess, you will discover that ultimately what you need most is to always be, not sporadically, your best self. That self who understands that the mistakes of those you love are simply misunderstandings. Your feeling that greater possessions, no matter of what kind they may be, will bring satisfaction or happiness by themselves is a misunderstanding. No person, place, or thing can give you happiness. They can give you a reason for happiness and a feeling of satisfaction, but the joy of living comes from within. Therefore, it is recommended here that you make the effort to obtain the things you feel will bring you joy, as already stated, that your desires are in accordance with the joy of living. In this volume, it is also intended to indicate the possibilities that are open to all who make a persistent effort to understand the law of visualization, and make a practical application of this knowledge on whatever plane they may be. The word effort, as used here, is not intended to convey the idea of strain. All study and meditation should be without effort or strain. I have attempted to show that starting from the principle of creative action or mental image, certain corresponding results are sure to follow. Although the laws of the universe cannot be altered, they can be made to work under specific conditions, thus producing results for individual progress that cannot be obtained under the spontaneous functioning of the law provided by nature. However, these suggestions I have given of the possibilities that are available to you through visualization may take you beyond your past experience, but they do not break anywhere the continuity of the law of cause and effect. If, through the suggestions given here, someone realizes that their mind is a center through which and in which all the power there is operating, simply waiting to be directed in the single and only way through which it can take specific action, and this means reaction in a physical or concrete form, then the mission of this book has been fulfilled. Try to remember that the image in which you think, feel, and see is reflected in the universal mind, and by the natural law of reciprocal action must return to you, either in spiritual or physical form. The knowledge of this law of reciprocal action between the individual and the universal mind opens for you free access to everything you wish to possess or be. It must be kept firmly in mind that all this can only be true for the individual who recognizes that their power to make a permanent mental image derives from the universal spirit of life, which originates everything, God, and can be used constructively only if it is employed and maintained in harmony with the nature of the originating spirit. To ensure this, there must be no inversion of the individual's thought regarding their relationship with the original universal spirit, which is that of a son or daughter, through whom the Father's mind acts and reacts. Conditioned in this way, what you think and feel yourself to be, the creative spirit of life is destined to faithfully reproduce in a corresponding reaction. This is the main reason why you must visualize yourself and your affairs as you wish them to be as existing facts, though invisible to the physical eye, and live in the image. An honest effort in doing this, always recognizing that your own mind is a projection of the original spirit, will prove to you that the best there is yours in all your ways. Genevieve Behrend, September 1921. Chapter 1. The Order of Visualization. The exercise of the faculty of visualization keeps your mind in order and attracts to you the things you need to make life more enjoyable in an orderly manner. If you train yourself in the practice of deliberately imagining your desire and examining it carefully, you will soon realize that your thoughts and desires come in a more orderly procession than ever before. After having reached the state of an orderly mentality, you will no longer be in a constant state of mental hurry. Hurry is fear and consequently destructive. In other words, when your understanding grasps the power to visualize the desire of your heart and hold it with your will, it will attract to you all the things necessary for the fulfillment of that image through the harmonious vibrations of the law of attraction. You will realize that since order is the first law of heaven, and visualization places things in their natural order, then visualizing must be a heavenly thing. Everyone visualizes, whether they know it or not. Visualization is the great secret of success. The conscious use of this great power attracts to you multiplied resources, intensifies your wisdom, and enables you to make use of advantages that you previously did not recognize. Now we fly through the air, not because someone has been able to change the laws of nature, but because the inventor of the flying machine learned how to apply the laws of nature and, by making an orderly use of them, produced the desired result. As far as natural forces are concerned, nothing has changed since the beginning. There were no airplanes in the year 1 because those of that generation could not conceive the idea as a practical possibility. The argument was, if it has never been done, it cannot be done. However, the laws and materials for flying machines existed then as now. Troward tells us that the great lesson he learned from the airplane and wireless telegraphy is the triumph of principle over precedence, and the working out of an idea to its logical conclusion, despite the accumulated contrary testimony of all past experience. With such an example before you, can you not realize that even greater secrets may be revealed? Furthermore, that you have the key within yourself, with which to unlock the secret chamber that contains the desire of your heart. All you need in order to use this key and make your life exactly as you wish it to be is a careful inquiry into the invisible causes that stand behind every outward and visible condition. Then, bring these invisible causes into harmony with your conception, and you will see that you can work out as practical realities the possibilities that at present seem only fantastic dreams. We all know that the balloon was the father of the airplane. In 1766, Henry Cavendish, an English nobleman, demonstrated that hydrogen gas was 7 times lighter than atmospheric air. From this discovery, the balloon came into existence, and from the ordinary balloon evolved the dirigible, a cigar-shaped aerostat. The study of aeronautics and the laws of aerial locomotion of birds and projectiles led to the belief that mechanisms could be developed by which machines, heavier than air, could be made to travel from one place to another, and remain in the air by maintaining a great speed, which would overcome by propulsive force the common law of gravitation. Professor Langley of Washington, who developed much of the theory that others later improved, was subjected to much ridicule when he sent a model airplane into the sky, only to bury its nose in the muddy waters of the Potomac. But the Wright brothers, who experimented in the late 19th century, realized the possibility of traveling through the air in a machine that had no gas bag. They saw themselves enjoying this means of transportation with great ease. It is said that when their various experiences did not turn out as expected, one of the brothers said to the other, "It's all right. Brother, I see myself riding in that machine, and it moves easily and steadily. Those Wright brothers knew what they wanted and kept their images constantly before them. Now transportation through the air is developing rapidly, and we are sure that in the near future it will become as common a method of travel as the automobile. When visualizing, or making a mental image, you are not trying to change the laws of nature. You are fulfilling them. Your objective in visualizing is to bring things into a regular order, both mentally and physically. When you realize that this method of employing the creative power brings your desires, one after another, into practical material realization, your confidence in the mysterious but infallible law of attraction, which has its central station of power in the very heart of your word image, becomes supreme. Nothing can shake it. You will never feel that it is necessary to take anything from anyone else. You will have learned that asking and seeking have as their correlatives receiving and finding. You will know that all you have to do is to supply the image of your desire to the plastic substance of the universe that flows into the thought molds. Chapter 2. How to attract the things you desire. The power within you, which allows you to form the image of a thought, is the starting point of everything that exists. In its original state, it is the undifferentiated, formless substance of life. The image of your thought creates the model, so to speak, in which this formless substance takes shape. Visualizing, or mentally seeing things and conditions as you desire them to be, is the condensation, the specialized power within you that could be illustrated by the comparison to a projector, which is one of the best symbols of the faculty of imagination. It illustrates the idea of the action of the creative spirit on the plane of initiative and selection, or in its concentrated, specialized form, in a very clear way. The slides illustrate your own mental image, invisible in the projector of your mind until you turn on the light of your will. That is, you illuminate your desire with absolute faith that the creative spirit of life within you is doing the work. Through the constant flow of the light of the will into the spirit, the desired image is projected onto the screen of the physical world, an exact reproduction of the slide or photo in your mind. Visualization without a will firm enough to inhibit every thought and feeling contrary to the image of your thought would be as useless as a projector without light. On the other hand, if your will is sufficiently developed to hold your image, in thought and feeling without any what-ifs, simply realizing that your thought is the great power of attraction, then your mental image will surely be projected onto the physical world just as images placed in a projector are shown on the screen. Try projecting the image in a projector with a light that constantly shifts from side to side, and you will have the effect of an uncertain will. It is very necessary to always have a strong and firm will behind the image, just as a strong and constant light is needed behind a presentation of images. The confident joy with which you create your image is a very powerful magnet for faith, and nothing can eliminate it. You are happier than ever because you have learned to recognize where your source of supply is, and you trust in its unfailing response to the direction you give it. With all said and done, happiness is the only thing every human being wants, and the study of visualization allows you to get more out of life than you have ever enjoyed before. Greater possibilities open up, more and more before you. A businessman once told me that by practicing visualization and forming the habit of spending a few minutes each day thinking about his work as he desired it to be, in a broad and extensive way, his orders had more than doubled in 6 months. His method consisted of entering a room every morning before breakfast and making a mental inventory of his business as he had left it the night before, and then expanding it. He said it expanded and expanded in this way, until his affairs were in a condition of remarkable success. He saw himself in his office doing everything he wanted to do. His occupation required him to meet many strangers every day. In his mental image, he saw himself meeting those people, understanding their needs, and supplying them just as they desired. This habit, he said, had strengthened and stabilized his will in an almost inconceivable way. Furthermore, by mentally seeing things as he desired them to be, he had acquired the confident feeling that a certain creative power was being exercised for him and through him in order to improve his little world. When you begin to visualize seriously, you may feel, as many do, that another person is forming the same image as yours, and that naturally it is not suitable for your purpose. Do not worry about this. Simply try to realize that your image is an orderly exercise of the universal creative power applied specifically. Then you can be sure that no one can work in opposition to you. The universal law of harmony prevents it. Strive to keep in mind that your mental image is the universal mind, specifically exercising its inherent powers of initiative and selection. God, or the universal mind, made man for the special purpose of differentiating itself through him. Everything that exists came into being in this same way, by this same law of self-differentiation, and for the same purpose. First came the idea, the mental image, or the prototype of the thing, which is the thing itself in its incipient state or plastic form. The great architect of the universe contemplates himself as manifesting through his opposite pole, matter, and the idea expands and projects itself until we have not only one world, but many worlds. Many people ask, but why do we have a physical world? The answer is, because it is the nature of the creative substance to solidify, under directivity rather than activity, just as it is the nature of wax to harden when it cools, or plaster to become firm and solid when exposed to air. Your image in this same divine substance in its fluid state taking shape through the individualized center of divine operation, your mind. And there is no power that can prevent this combination of spiritual substance from becoming a physical form. It is the nature of the spirit to complete its work, and an idea is not complete until it has made itself a vehicle. Nothing can prevent your image from entering concrete form except the same power that created it, you yourself. Suppose you desire to have a more orderly room. You look around your room, and the idea of order suggests boxes, closets, shelves, hooks, and so on. The box, the closet, and the hooks are all concrete ideas of order. They are the vehicles through which order and harmony are suggested. Chapter 3. Relation between the mental form and the physical form. Some people feel that it is not very appropriate to visualize for things. They say it is too material. But material form is necessary for the self-recognition of the spirit from the individual point of view, and this is the means through which the creative process is carried forward. Therefore, far from matter being an illusion and something that should not be, matter is the necessary channel for the self-differentiation of the spirit. However, it is not my desire to lead you into long and tedious scientific reasoning in order to remove the mystery of visualization and place it on a logical foundation. Naturally, each person will do it in their own way. My only desire is to point out the easiest way I know, which is the path by which Troward guides me. I am sure that you will conclude, as I have, that the only mystery in relation to visualization is the mystery of life taking form, governed by immutable and easily understood laws. We all possess more power and greater possibilities than we realize, and visualizing is one of the greatest of these powers, which brings other possibilities to our observation. When we pause to think for a moment, we realize that the existence of the cosmos must be the result of a cosmic mind, which binds all individual minds to certain generic units of action, thereby producing all things as realities and nothing as illusions. If you take this idea from Troward and meditate on it without prejudice, you will surely realize that concrete material form is an absolute necessity of the creative process. Also, that matter is not an illusion, but a necessary channel through which life differentiates itself. If you consider matter in its correct order, as the opposite pole to spirit, you will find no antagonism between them. On the contrary, together they constitute a harmonious whole. And when you realize this, you feel, in your practice of visualization, that you are working from cause to effect, from principle to end. In reality, your mental image is the specialized functioning of the original spirit. One could speak for hours along purely scientific lines, showing, as Troward says, that the raw material for the formation of solar systems is universally distributed throughout space. Yet investigation shows that, although the heavens are filled with millions of suns, there are spaces that show no signs of cosmic activity. This being true, there must be something that started cosmic activity in certain places, passing by others where the raw material was equally available. At first glance, one might attribute the development of cosmic energy to the etheric particles themselves. Upon investigation, however, we find that this is mathematically impossible in a medium distributed equally throughout space, where all its particles are in equilibrium. Therefore, no particle possesses in itself a greater power of originating movement than another. Thus, we find that the initial movement, although working in and through the particles of the primary substance, is not the particles themselves. It is this something to which we refer when we speak of spirit. This same power that brought universal substance into existence will bring your individual thought or mental image into physical form. There is no difference in the power. The only difference is a difference of degree. The power and the substance are the same, only that, in working out your mental image, it has transferred its creative energy from the universal to the particular, and is working in the same infallible way from its specific center, your mind. Chapter 4. The Functioning of Your Mental Image. The functioning of a large telephone system can be used as an analogy. The main central office is subdivided into many branches, with each branch in direct connection with the main central office, and each individual branch recognizing the origin of its existence, reports all things to the central office. Therefore, when assistance of any nature is required, new materials, difficult repairs that need to be made, or whatever, the branch in need goes to its main central office. It would not think of referring its difficulties or its successes to the main central office of a telegraph system, even though they might belong to the same organization. These different branch central offices know that the only solution for any difficulty must come from the central office from which they were projected and to which they are always attached. If we, as individual branches of the universal mind, refer our difficulties in the same confident manner to the source from which they were projected, and use the remedies it has provided us, we will realize what Jesus meant when he said, "Ask, and you shall receive." Each of our requirements would be met. Undoubtedly, the Father must supply the child. The trunk of the tree cannot fail to provide for its branches. Everything animate or inanimate is called into existence or culmination by a power that in turn does not culminate. The power that creates the mental image, the original spiritual substance of your imagined desire, does not culminate. It projects the substance of itself, which is a solidified counterpart of itself, while remaining invisible to the physical eye. Only those who appreciate the value of visualizing are able to understand the meaning when Paul said, "The worlds were formed by the word of God. What is seen was not made from visible things." There is nothing unusual or mysterious in the idea that the image of your desire enters material evidence. It is the work of a universal natural law. The world was projected by the self-contemplation of the universal mind, and this same action is carried out in its individualized branch that is the mind of man. Everything in the entire world, from the hat on your head to the boots on your feet, has its beginning in the mind and is brought into existence in exactly the same way. All are projected thoughts, solidified. Your personal advancement in evolution depends on your correct use of the power of visualizing, and your use of it depends on whether you can recognize that you, yourself, are a particular center through which and in which the creative spirit is always finding new expression of the potentialities already existing within itself. This is evolution, this continuous unfolding of existing things, though outwardly invisible. Your mental image is the force of attraction that evolves and combines the original substance into a specific form. Your image is the center of combined and evolved power, so to speak, through which the original creative spirit expresses itself. Its creative action is unlimited, without beginning and without end, and always progressive and orderly. It proceeds by stages, each stage being a necessary preparation for the one that follows. Now, let's see if we can get an idea of the different stages by which things in the world have come to be. Troward says, if we can get to the applied principle that is producing these results, we can very quickly and easily give it personal application. First, we find that the originating thought of life, or spirit in relation to itself, is the simple knowledge of its own being, and this requiring a relation to something else produces a primary ether, a universal substance from which everything in the world develops. Troward also tells us that while this consciousness of being is a necessary basis for any further possibility, there is not much more to say about it. It is the same with the individualized spirit, which is yourself. Before entertaining the idea of making a mental image of your desire as existing, you must have an idea of your being, of your I am, and as soon as you are conscious of your I am, you begin to desire to enjoy the freedom that this consciousness suggests. You want to do more and be more, and as you fulfill this desire within yourself, the localized spirit begins conscious activities in you. The matter that interests you most is the specific action of the creative spirit of life, the specialized universal mind. The localized germ of God in you is your personality, your individuality, and since the joy of absolute freedom is inherent in the nature of this germ of God, it is natural that you should strive to enjoy it through its specific center. And as you grow in the understanding that your being, your individuality, is God particularizing itself, you will naturally develop divine tendencies. You want to enjoy life and freedom. You want freedom in your affairs, as well as in your consciousness, and it is natural that you should. Always with this progressive desire, there is a faint mental image. As your desire and recognition grow into an intense desire, this desire becomes a clear mental image. For example, a young woman studying music would like to have a piano in order to practice at home. She wants the piano so much that she can mentally see it in one of the rooms. She holds the image of the piano and indulges in mental reflection on the pleasure and advantage it will be to have the piano in a corner of the living room. One day she finds it there just as she had pictured it. As you grow in understanding who you are, where you come from, what the purpose of your being is, and how you desire the purpose for which you are destined to be fulfilled, you will provide an ever more perfect center through which the creative spirit of life can enjoy itself. And you will realize that there can be but one creative process filling all space, which is the same in its potentiality whether universal or individual. Furthermore, everything that exists, whether on the plane of the visible or invisible, had its origin in the localized action of thought, or a mental image, and this includes you because you are localized universal spirit, and the same creative action is taking place through you. Now, undoubtedly you will be wondering why there is so much sickness and misery in the world. If the same power and intelligence that brought the world into existence is in operation in the mind of man, why does it not manifest as joy, health, and abundance? If one can fulfill one's desires simply by making a mental image of that desire, holding it with the will, and doing, without anxiety, whatever is necessary on the outer plane to bring that desire to realization, then there seems to be no reason for the existence of sickness and poverty. Certainly, no one wants them either. The first reason is that few people take the trouble to investigate the working principle of the laws of life. If they did, they would soon convince themselves that there is no need for the sickness and poverty we see around us. They would realize that visualization is a principle and not a fallacy. There are very few who have found it worthwhile to study this simple though absolutely infallible law, which would free them from bondage. However, the race as a whole is not willing to give the time required for this study. It is either too simple or too difficult. They may make an image of their desire with some understanding of visualization for a day or two, but more often it is for an hour or so. If you insist on mentally seeing yourself surrounded by things and conditions as you desire them to be, you will understand that the creative energy sends its plastic substance in the direction indicated by the tendency of your thoughts. Herein lies the advantage of holding your thought in the form of a mental image. The more enthusiasm and faith you are able to put into your image, the faster it will become visible form, and your enthusiasm is increased by keeping your desire secret. The moment you tell it to any living being, at that moment your power weakens. Your power, your magnet of attraction, is not as strong, and therefore cannot reach as far. The more perfectly your secret is kept between your mind and your external self, the more vitality you give to your power of attraction. One tells one's problems to weaken them, to get them out of the mind, and when a thought goes out, its power is dissipated. Talk about it to yourself, and even write it down and then destroy the paper. However, this does not mean that you should strive energetically to force the power to work out your image on the special lines that you think it should. That method would soon exhaust you and hinder the fulfillment of your purpose. A rich relative does not have to die, or someone lose a fortune in the street, to materialize the $10,000 you are mentally picturing. All you have to do is create a mental image of the desire of your heart, and hold it cheerfully in place with your will, always conscious that the same infinite power that brought the universe into existence gave you form in order to enjoy itself in you and through you. And since it is all life, love, light, energy, peace, beauty, and joy, and is the only creative power that exists, the form it takes in and through you depends on the direction indicated by your thought. In you, it is undifferentiated, waiting to take any direction given as it passes through the instrument that has been made for the purpose of self-distribution. You. It is this power that enables you to transfer your thoughts from one form to another. The power to change your ideas is the individualized universal power taking the initiative, giving direction to the formless substance contained in every thought. It is the simplest thing in the world to give this highly sensitive substance any form you want, through visualization. Anyone can do it with a little effort. Once you really believe that your mind is a center through which the formless substance of everything in your world involuntarily takes form, the only reason your image does not always materialize is because you must have introduced something antagonistic to the fundamental principle. Very often, this destructive element is caused by the frequency with which you change your images. After many changes, you decide that your original desire is what you want after all. With this conclusion, you begin to wonder why, being the first picture, it has not materialized. The substance with which you are mentally dealing is more sensitive than the most sensitive photographer's film. If, while taking a picture, you suddenly remember that you had already taken a picture on that same plate, you should not expect a perfect result from either image. On the other hand, it is possible that you have taken two images on the same plate unconsciously. When the plate has been developed and the image is in physical view, you do not condemn the principle of photography, nor are you perplexed without understanding why your image has turned out so unsatisfactory. You do not feel that it is impossible to obtain a good, clear image of the matter in question. You know that you can do it simply by starting from the beginning, putting in a new plate and determining to be more careful when taking the picture next time. If these lines are followed, you will be sure of a satisfactory result. If you proceed in the same way with your mental image, doing your corresponding part in the mental framework of confidence, the result will be perfect. The laws of visualization are as infallible as the laws governing photography. In fact, photography is the result of visualization. Once again, the results in visualizing the fulfillment of your desires may be imperfect, and your desires delayed by the misuse of this power, due to the idea that the fulfillment of your desires is determined by people or conditions. The creative principle is in no way dependent on any person, place, or thing. It has no past and knows no future. The law is the original creative principle of life is the universal here and eternal now. It creates its own vehicles through which to operate. Therefore, past experience has no influence on your current image. So do not try to obtain your desire through a channel that may not be natural for it, even though it may seem reasonable to you. Your feeling should be that the thing or the consciousness you so desire is normal and natural, a part of yourself, a form of your evolution. If you can do this, there is no power that can prevent you from enjoying the fulfillment of the image you have in mind, or any other that you may create. Chapter 5. Expressions from Beginners. Hundreds of people have realized that visualization is Aladdin's lamp for those with a powerful will. General Foch says that his feelings were so outraged during the Franco-Prussian War in 1870 that he visualized himself leading a French army to victory against the Germans. He said he made his image, smoked his pipe, and waited. This is one of the results of visualizing with which we are all familiar. A famous actress wrote a long article in one of the leading Sunday newspapers last winter, describing how she rid herself of excess weight by constantly seeing her figure as she wanted it to be. A very interesting letter came to me from the wife of a doctor while I was lecturing in New York. It began by saying that she hoped I would never discontinue my lectures on visualization, because they were helping humanity realize the wonderful fact that they possess the means of liberation within themselves. In relation to her own experience, she said that she was born on the east side of New York, in the poorest neighborhood. From her earliest childhood, she had dreamed of one day marrying a doctor. This dream gradually formed a permanent mental image. The first position she obtained was as a servant in a doctor's family. Leaving that place, she entered the family of another doctor. The wife of her employer died, and the doctor married her, the result of the long-held yearning. After that, she and her husband conceived the idea of owning a fruit farm in the South. A mental image of the idea was formed, and they placed their faith in its eventual fulfillment. The letter she sent me came from her fruit farm in the South. Her second mental image had seen the light of materialization. Many letters of a similar nature come to me every day. The following is a case that was printed in the New York Herald last May. Atlantic City, May 5th. She was an elderly woman and was brought today before Judge Clarence Goldenberg in the police court. She was so weak and tired that she could barely stand. The judge asked the court clerk what she was accused of. "Stealing a bottle of milk, Your Honor," replied the officer. She took it from the door of a boarding house in the center this morning before dawn. Why did you do that? The Judge Goldenberg asked her. I was hungry, said the old woman. Well, she's not very rich, but she's no longer poor. I've been looking for her for months. I have $500 that belong to you from the estate of a relative. I am the executor of the estate. Judge Goldenberg paid the woman's fine from his own pocket and then directed her to his office, where he gave her her legacy and sent a policeman to find her a place to stay. Later, I learned that this little woman had been desiring and mentally picturing $500, all the while completely ignorant of how they might come to her, but she held the vision and strengthened it with her faith. In an issue of Good Housekeeping magazine, there was an article by Addington Bruce titled Stiffening Your Mental Backbone. It is very instructive, and it would benefit everyone to read it. He said in one part, form the habit of spending a few minutes each day thinking about your work in a big, broad, imaginative way. It is a vital necessity for you and a useful service to society. James J. Hill, the great railroad magnate, before he began building his coast-to-coast route, said that he took hundreds of trips along the line before a single rail was laid. It is said that he would sit for hours with a map of the United States in front of him and mentally travel from coast to coast, just as we do now over his fulfilled mental image. It would be possible to call your attention to hundreds of similar cases. The method of picturing what you desire is both simple and enjoyable, once you understand the principle behind it well enough to believe in it. Above all else, you must be sure of what it is you really want, and then specialize your desire along the lines given in the following chapter. Chapter 6. Suggestions for Making Your Mental Image. Perhaps you want to feel that you have been living for some purpose. You want to be content and happy. You think that good health and a successful business would give you satisfaction. After having definitely decided what it is you want, proceed to imagine yourself healthy and your business growing as successful as you can naturally conceive it. The best time to make your defined image is just before breakfast, and again, before retiring at night. Since it is necessary to give enough time, it may be necessary to get up earlier than usual. Go to a room where you won't be disturbed, meditate for a few moments on the practical functioning of the law of visualizing, and ask yourself, how did the things around me come into existence? How can I more quickly come into contact with my invisible source? Some feel that comfort is best expressed and experienced by sitting in a chair instead of on the floor. Thus, at the beginning of meditation, the chair was the desire to be at ease. With this came the image of some type of chair. The same principle applies to the hat and clothes you wear. Go carefully into the thought of the principle behind each thing. Establish it as a personal experience. Make it a fact for your consciousness. If you are thorough in this, you will find yourself in the deep consciousness beneath the surface of your own power of thought. Next, open a window, take approximately 10 deep breaths, and during that time draw a large imaginary circle of light around you. As you inhale, keeping yourself in the center of this circle of light, observe great rays of light coming from the circle and entering your body at all points, centralizing at your solar plexus. Hold the breath for a few moments at this central point of your body, the solar plexus. Then exhale slowly. While doing this, mentally see the imaginary rays or spray of light passing through the body and going down and out through the feet. Mentally spray the entire body with this imaginary light. When you have finished the breathing exercise, sit comfortably in a chair and mentally knowing that there is one life, one substance. And this substance of life of the universe finds pleasure and self-recognition in you. Repeat some affirmations of this kind until you feel the truth and reality of the words you are affirming. Then begin your image. Whether your desire is a state of consciousness or a possession, large or small, begin at the beginning. If you want a house, begin by seeing yourself in the type of house you desire. Go through it. Carefully note the rooms, where the windows are located, and any other detail that helps you feel the reality of the image. You can rearrange some of the furniture and look in some of the mirrors to see how healthy, wealthy, and happy you look. Review your image again and again until you feel the reality of it, then write down everything you have seen with the feeling that the best there is mine. There is no limit to me, because my mind is a center of divine operation, and it is as certain that your image will become reality in your physical world as that the sun is shining. Chapter 7. Things to remember when using the power of thought. In using your power of thought for the production of new conditions. First, make sure you know exactly what conditions you wish to produce. Then, carefully consider the results to which the realization of your desire will lead you. Second, by allowing your thought to dwell upon a mental image, you are concentrating the creative action of the spirit in this center, where all its forces are equally balanced. Third, visualization brings your objective mind to a state of equilibrium, which enables you to consciously direct the flow of the spirit toward a definitely recognized purpose, and to carefully guard your thoughts from including a flow in the opposite direction. Fourth, you must always bear in mind that you are dealing with a wonderful potential energy, which has not yet been differentiated into any particular form, and that, by the action of your mind, you can differentiate it into any specific form that you desire. Your image helps you keep your mind fixed on the fact that the inflow of this creative energy is taking place. Moreover, through your mental image, you are determining the direction you wish the sensitive creative power to take, and by doing so, you make the externalization of your image a certainty. Fifth, remember that when you are visualizing correctly, there is no strenuous effort to hold the thought form in place. Strenuous effort defeats its purpose and suggests the consciousness of an adverse force to be fought, and this creates conditions adverse to your image. Sixth, by holding your image in a cheerful mental frame, you shut out all thoughts that may disperse or dissipate the spiritual nucleus of the image. Because the law is creative in its action, your imagined desire is certain of realization. Seventh, the seventh and great thing to remember in visualization is that you are making a mental image in order to determine the quality you are giving to the previously undifferentiated substance and energy, rather than arranging the specific circumstances for its manifestation. That is the work of the creative power itself. It will build its own forms of expression naturally if you allow it, and this will save you a great deal of unnecessary anxiety. What you really want is expansion in a certain direction, whether of health, wealth, or whatever else you desire, and if you achieve it, as you surely will, if you confidently hold the image, what does it matter if it comes through some channel you thought it could not, or through some other of whose existence you had no idea? You are concentrating energy of a particular kind for a particular purpose. Keep this in mind and let the specific details take care of themselves, and never mention your intention to anyone. Always remember that nature, from its clearly visible surface to its most arcane depths, is a vast storehouse of light and good entirely devoted to your individual use. Your conscious oneness with the great whole is the secret of success, and once you have fathomed this, you can enjoy your possession of the whole or a part of it at will, for through your recognition you have made it and can progressively make it more your own. Never forget that every physical thing, whether for you or against you, was a sustained thought before it was a thing. Thought as thought is neither good nor bad. It is creative action and always takes physical form. Therefore, the thoughts you dwell upon become the things you possess or do not possess. A man came to me telling me how much he longed to marry a certain young woman, but felt he could not do so because his salary was low and his job uncertain. I spoke the word of the ever-present, true, unlimited supply, and explained to him that love knows no failure. It is yours to enjoy. See yourself in the kind of home you both desire. Do your part, keep loving the girl, and absolutely believe in that which lives and loves in you. A few months later, both came to my study looking radiantly happy. I knew they had married. The woman said to me, "Dear Mrs. Behrend, we are very happy because now we know how to use our power of thought and keep our consciousness as one with all that we want. So be yourself and enjoy life in your own divine way. Do not fear being your true self, for everything you want wants you." Chapter 8. Why I devoted myself to the study of mental science. I have often been asked about my reasons for taking up the study of mental science, and as to the results of my search, not only in the knowledge of the principles, but also in the application of that knowledge to the development of my own life. Such questions are justifiable, because one who essays the role of messenger of psychological truths can only be convincing as he or she has proven them in the laboratory of personal mental experience. This is particularly true in my case, as the only personal student of Judge Troward, the great master of mental science. His teaching is based upon the relationship transmitted by the individual mind to the universal creative mind, which is the giver of life, and the manner in which that relationship may be invoked to secure expansion and fuller expression in the individual life. My initial impulse toward the study of mental science was an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Into every life there must come some such experience of spiritual isolation as that which pervaded my life at that period. Even though I found myself daily in the midst of friends, surrounded by laughter and joy, there was a persistent feeling that I was alone in the world. I had been a widow for about 3 years, wandering from one country to another, in search of peace of mind. The circumstances and environment of my life were such that my friends looked upon me as an unusually fortunate young woman. Though they recognized that I had suffered a great loss when my husband died, they knew that he had left me well established, free to go anywhere I wished. Yet, had my friends been able to penetrate my innermost emotions, they would have found a deep sense of emptiness and isolation. This feeling inspired a spirit of unrest, which led me again and again into the fruitless search on the exterior, for what I later learned could only be obtained from within. I studied Christian Science, but it failed to give me comfort, despite the full realization of the great work the scientists were doing, and even though I had had the pleasure and privilege of knowing Mrs. Eddy personally. But it was impossible for me to accept the fundamental teachings of Christian Science and to make a practical application of it. When I was about to abandon the search for satisfaction and resign myself to resuming a life of seeming attractions, a friend invited me to visit the great seer and master, Abdu'l-Baha. Following my interview with this most wonderful of men, my search for satisfaction began to change. He told me that I would travel the world over in search of truth, and when I found it, I would speak of it very loudly. The fulfillment of this great seer's statement then seemed impossible, but it carried a measure of encouragement, and at least indicated that my previous search had been in the wrong direction. I began faintly to grope for satisfaction within myself, for had he not intimated that I should find the truth, that was the great thing, and the only thing I recall of our interview. A few days later, upon visiting the office of a New Thought practitioner, my attention was attracted to a book on his table entitled The Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science by Thomas Troward. I was interested to see that Troward was a retired divisional judge of Punjab, India. I purchased the book, thinking that I would read it that afternoon. Many have tried to do the same, only to find, as I did, that the book must be studied in order to be understood, and hundreds have decided, just as I did, to give it their whole attention. After finding this treasure of a book, I went into the country for a few days, and while there, I studied the volume as thoroughly as I could. It seemed exceedingly difficult, and I decided to purchase another Troward book, hoping its study would not require so much effort. Upon inquiry, I was told that a later volume, The Door Lectures, was much simpler and better than the other two books. When I had it, I found that it too must be studied. It took me weeks and months to get even a vague concept of the meaning of the first chapter of Dory, which is entitled Entering into the Spirit of It. By this I mean that it took me months to enter into the spirit of what I was reading. But, in the meantime, a paragraph on page 26 caught my attention. It seemed to me the greatest thing I had ever read. I memorized it and strove with all my soul to enter into the spirit of Troward's words. The paragraph reads, "My mind is a center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression, and this means the production of something beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in the past experience, though issuing from it by an orderly sequence of growth. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, it must operate in the same manner with me, and, in consequence, in my own special world, of which I am the center, it will advance to produce new conditions, always in advance of anything that has gone before." It took an effort on my part to memorize this paragraph, but in the striving toward this end, the words seemed to carry with them a certain exhilaration. Every repetition of the paragraph made it easier for me to enter into the spirit of it. The words expressed exactly what I had been seeking. My one desire was peace of mind. It seemed comforting to believe that the divine operation in me could expand to a fuller expression and bring forth more and more satisfaction. In fact, a peace of mind and a greater degree of satisfaction than I had ever known. The paragraph further inspired me with a deep interest to feel that the spark of life in me could bring into my life something entirely new. I did not wish to wipe out my past experience, and that was exactly what Troward said would not happen. The divine operation would not exclude my past experience, but would proceed from it, bringing forth something new that transcended anything I had previously experienced. Meditation upon these statements brought with it a certain feeling of joy. How marvelous it would be if I could sincerely accept and believe, beyond all doubt, that this statement of Troward was true. Surely the divine could not change its inherent nature, and since divine life is operating in me, I must be divinely inhabited, and the divine in me must operate in the same way that it operates on the universal plane. This meant that my whole world of circumstance, friends, and conditions would finally become a world of satisfaction and joy of which I am the center. All this would happen as soon as I could control my mind and thereby provide a concrete center around which the divine energies could act. Surely it was worth a try. If Troward had found this truth, why should I not achieve it? I later decided to study with the man who realized and gave to the world such a great statement that it lifted me from my state of despondency. The immediate difficulty was the need of increasing my finances. Chapter 9. How I Attracted $20,000. In the laboratory of experience, in which I went forth to test my newly revealed relationship to the divine operation, the first problem was of a financial nature. My income was stipulated as more than sufficient for my daily needs, but it did not seem sufficient for me to comfortably go to England, where Troward lived, and remain for an indefinite period to study with so great a master as he. So, before asking whether Troward took pupils, or if I would be eligible in case he did, I began to use the paragraph I had memorized. Every day, indeed, almost every hour, the words were in my mind. My mind is a center of divine operation, and divine operation means expansion into something better than has gone before. From the Edinburgh Lectures, I had read something concerning the law of attraction, and from the chapter on causes and conditions, I had gathered a vague idea of visualization. So, every night, before going to sleep, I made a mental picture of the desired $20,000 that seemed necessary for me to go study with Troward. 20 imaginary $1,000 bills were counted out nightly in my room, and then, with the idea of more emphatically impressing my mind with the fact that these $20,000 were for the purpose of going to England and studying with Troward, I would picture myself buying my ticket, walking up and down the deck of the steamer from New York to London, and finally, I would see myself accepted as Troward's pupil. This process was repeated every morning and every evening, always impressing more fully upon my mind Troward's memorized statement. My mind is a center of divine operation. I strove to hold this affirmation in the background of my consciousness all the time, not having any thought in mind of how I might obtain the money. Probably the reason why there was no thought of the avenues through which the money might come was because I could not imagine where the $20,000 could come from. So I simply held my thought constant and let the attracting power find its own means. One day, as I walked along the street, taking deep breathing exercises, the thought came. My mind is surely a center of divine operation. If God fills all space, then God must also be in my mind. If I want this money to study with Troward so that I may know the truth of life, then both the money and the truth must be mine, even though I am unable to feel or see the physical manifestations of either. Still, I declared, they must be mine. While these reflections were being carried on in my mind, the thoughts seemed to have come from within me. I am all the substance there is. Then, from another channel in my brain, the answer seemed to come. Of course, that is it. Everything must have its beginning in mind. The I idea must be the single and primary substance that exists, and this means money as well as everything else. My mind accepted this idea, and immediately all tension of mind and body relaxed. There was a feeling of absolute certainty of being in touch with all the power that life has to give. All thought of money, teacher, or even my own personality disappeared in the great wave of joy that swept over my whole being. I walked without stopping, this feeling of joy steadily increasing, and it expanded until everything around me seemed radiant with glowing light. Every person I passed seemed illuminated as I was. All consciousness of personality had vanished, and in its place was that immense sense of joy and satisfaction. That night, when I made my picture of the $20,000, it was with an altogether different aspect. On former occasions, in making my mental picture, I had felt that I was arousing something within myself. This time there was no sense of effort. I simply counted out the $20,000. Then, in an unexpected manner, from a source of which I had no consciousness at the time, a possible avenue seemed to open up through which the money might come to me. At first, it took great effort not to be enthusiastic. Everything seemed so marvelous, so glorious. I was in touch with supply. But had not Troward warned his readers to keep all emotion out of their minds at the first indication of realization of union with the infinite source, and to treat this fact as the perfectly natural result which had come through our asking? This was even more difficult for me than was the realization of the idea that all the substance there is, I am. I, the idea, am the beginning of all forms, visible or invisible. As soon as a circumstance appeared that indicated the direction through which the $20,000 might come, I not only made a supreme effort to regard the indicated direction calmly as the first sprouting of the seed I had sown in the absolute, but I also left no stone unturned to follow up that direction, thereby doing my part. In this way, one circumstance seemed naturally to lead to another, until, step by step, my desired $20,000 were secured. Keeping my mind balanced and free from exaltation was my greatest effort, this first concrete fruit of my study of mental science as expounded by the Troward book had come by, carefully following the methods which he had outlined. Therefore, in this connection, I can offer the reader no better gift than to quote from Troward's book, The Edinburgh Lectures, from which a complete idea of the line of action I strove to follow may be derived. In the chapter on causes and conditions, he says, "To get good results, we must properly understand our relation to the great impersonal power which we are using. This power is intelligent, and we are intelligent, and the two intelligences must cooperate. We must not rush to the law expecting it to do for us what it can only do through us. And therefore, we must use our intelligence with the knowledge that it is acting as the instrument of a greater intelligence. And because we have this knowledge, all anxiety as to the final result may and should cease. In practice, we should first form the ideal conception of our object, with the definite intention of impressing it upon the universal mind. It is this intention which removes such a thought from the region of mere casual fancies, and then affirm that our knowledge of the law is sufficient reason for a calm expectation of the corresponding result, and that therefore all the necessary conditions will now be brought to us in due order. We can then return to the affairs of our daily life with the calm assurance that the initial conditions are already there or will soon come to light. If we do not immediately see them, let us rest content with the knowledge that the spiritual prototype is already in existence, and wait until some circumstance pointing in the desired direction begins to manifest. It may be a very small circumstance, but it is the direction and not the magnitude which is to be considered. As soon as we see it, we should treat it as the first sprouting of the seed sown in the absolute, and calmly and without excitement do whatever the circumstance may seem to require. Then later we shall see that this fact, in its turn, will lead to another circumstance in the same direction, until we find ourselves guided, step by step, to the accomplishment of our object. In this way, the understanding of the great principle of the law of supply by repeated experience will set us more and more completely free from thoughts of anxiety or laborious work and bring us into a new world, where the useful employment of all our powers, whether mental or physical, will only be a further unfolding of our individuality on the lines of its own nature, and therefore a perpetual source of health and happiness. This is a sufficient incentive, surely, for the careful study of the laws which govern the relation between the individual and the universal mind. To my mind, then as now, this quotation sums up the nucleus and center of the method and the necessary form of approach for coming into touch with the infinite supply. This, together with the previously quoted statement, "My mind is a center of divine operation," etc., constituted the only apparent means of attracting to myself the $20,000. My constant effort to enter into the spirit of these declarations and to attract to myself the necessary sum took me about 6 weeks, at the end of which time I had in my bank the required $20,000. This could be made into a long story, giving all the details, but the facts, as I have now narrated them, will give you a definite idea of the magnetic condition of my mind while the $20,000 were finding their way to me. Chapter 10. How I Became the Only Personal Student of Thomas Troward, the Great Mental Scientist. As soon as the idea of studying with Troward came to me, I asked a friend to write to him for me, feeling that perhaps my friend could express my desire in better or more convincing terms than I could employ. Out of all the letters written by this friend, I did not receive a single reply. This was so discouraging that I would have entirely abandoned the idea of becoming Troward's student, were it not for the experience I had had that day on the street, when my whole world became luminous, and I was reminded of the promise, "All things whatsoever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." With this experience in my mind, my passage to England was arranged, even though my letters were seemingly ignored. We wrote again, however, and finally received a reply, very courteous, though not very positive. Troward did not take pupils. He had no time to devote to a student. Despite this definite decision, I refused to become discouraged. Because of the remembrance of my experience on the day when the light and the thought had come to me, I am all the substance there is. I seemed to be able to live that experience at will, and with it there always came a flood of renewed courage and energy. We traveled to London, and from there I wired Troward requesting an interview. The telegram was answered promptly, setting a date when he could see us. At this time, Troward lived at Ruin Manor, a tiny place in the southern part of England, about 20 miles from a railway station. We could not find it on the map, and with great difficulty Cook's touring agency in London found the location for us. There was very little speculation in my mind as to what Troward would say to me at this interview. I always held the feeling that the truth was mine, also that it would grow and expand in my consciousness until peace and joy were outwardly, as well as inwardly, manifestations of my individual life. We arrived at Troward's home in a terrific storm, and were cordially received by Troward himself, whom I found, to my surprise, to be more French than English in type, as I afterward learned he was descended from the Huguenot race. He was a man of medium height, with rather a large head, a large nose, and eyes that fairly danced with merriment. After being introduced to the other members of the family and given a cup of hot tea, we were invited into the drawing room, where Troward talked very freely of everything except my proposed studies. It seemed almost impossible to bring him to that subject. Nevertheless, just before we left, I asked him quite boldly, "Could you not reconsider your decision about taking a personal pupil? I desire very much to study with you." To which he replied in a very indifferent fashion, that he felt he could not give the time required for personal instruction, but that he would be pleased to give me the names of 2 or 3 books which he felt would not only be interesting, but instructive to me. He said he was much flattered and pleased that I had traveled from America to study with him, and as we walked through his house to our automobile, his manner became less indifferent. A feeling of sympathy seemed to touch his heart, and he turned to me with the comment, "You may write to me, if you care to do so, after you arrive in Paris, and perhaps, if I have time in the autumn, we might arrange something, though it does not now seem possible." I lost no time in following up his cordial invitation to write. My letters were all answered promptly and courteously, but there was never a word of encouragement concerning my proposed studies. Finally, about 2 months later, a letter arrived with this question in it: "What do you think is the meaning of this verse in the 21st chapter of Revelations? The city lieth 4 square, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal." This is from Revelations 21, verse 16. Instinctively, I knew that my chance of studying with Troward hinged upon giving the correct answer to that question. The definition of the verse seemed entirely beyond me. Naturally, answers came to my mind, but I intuitively knew them to be incorrect. I began to bombard my academic friends and acquaintances with the same question. Lawyers, doctors, priests, nuns, and clergymen all over the world received letters from me with this question in it. The answers began to come back to me, but intuition told me that not one was correct. All the time I was trying to find the answer for myself, but no answer came. I learned the verse by heart in order to meditate upon it. I began a search in Paris for the books Troward had recommended to me, and after 2 or 3 days searching, we crossed the River Seine to the Ile de Cité to go into some of the old bookshops there. The books were out of print, and these were the last places in which we might possibly find them. Finally, we came to a tiny shop that had them. The man had only 1 copy of each, owing to the high price. As I objected to the clerk, my eye fell upon the work of an astrologer, and laughingly I picked it up and asked, "Do you think this professor will read my horoscope?" The clerk looked horrified at the suggestion and answered, "What? No, madam. He is one of the greatest astrologers in France. He does not read horoscopes." In spite of this answer, there was a persistent urge within me to go to the man. The friend who had accompanied me in my search for the books protested, and by all means tried to dissuade me from going to the famous astrologer, but I insisted. When we arrived at his office, I felt somewhat embarrassed to ask him to read my horoscope. Nevertheless, there was nothing to do but put the question. Reluctantly, the professor invited us into his paper-strewn study. Reluctantly, and also impatiently, he asked us to sit down. Very courteously and coldly, he told me that he did not read horoscopes. His whole manner said more plainly than words could that he wished us to leave. My friend stood up. I was at a loss what to do next, for I felt that I was not ready to go. My intuition seemed to tell me that there was something for me there, but I could not define what it was, so I stood a moment, much to the disgust and embarrassment of my friend, when one of the professor's enormous Persian cats jumped up into my lap. "Down, Jack!" the professor shouted. "What does that mean?" He seemed to question himself. Then, with a greater interest than he had shown up to now in me, the professor said with a smile, "I have never before seen that cat go to a stranger, madam. My cat pleads for you, too. Now I feel an interest in your horoscope, and if you will give me the data, I will write it out for you with pleasure." There was a great feeling of happiness in me when he made this statement, which he concluded by saying, "I do not feel that you really care about your horoscope." The truth of this statement amazed me, for I did not care about the horoscope and could give no reason why I was letting him do it. "However," he said, "may I call on Sunday afternoon next for your data?" On Sunday afternoon at the appointed time, the professor arrived, and I was handing him the sheet of paper with all the data of my birth, etc., when the thought arose to ask the professor the answer to the question Troward had given me from verse 16, chapter 21 of Revelation. The thought was immediately carried into effect, and I found myself asking this man what he thought this verse meant. Without pausing to think it over, he immediately replied, "It means this: the city means the truth, and the truth is non-invertible. Every side you approach it from is exactly the same." Intuitively and without doubt I recognized this answer as the true one, and my joy knew no bounds, for I was certain that with this correct answer in my possession, Troward would accept me as his student in the autumn. As the great astrologer was leaving, I explained everything about my desire to study with Troward, how I had come from New York City with that distinct purpose, seemingly without success, until the answer to the test question had been given to me by him. He was much interested and asked many questions about Troward, and when I asked him to please send me the bill for his service, he smilingly replied, "Let me know if the great Troward accepts you as his student," and bade me good afternoon. I hastened to my room to wire Troward, giving my answer to the question from verse 16, chapter 21 of Revelations. There was an immediate answer from Troward which read, "Your answer is correct. I am starting a course of lectures on the Great Pyramid in London. If you care to attend them, we shall be pleased to have you. And afterward, If you still wish to study with me, I think we can arrange it." Upon receipt of this reply, arrangements were made to leave Paris for London. I attended all the lectures, receiving much instruction from them, after which arrangements were made for studying with Troward. 2 days before leaving for Cornwall, I received the following letter from Troward, clearly indicating the line of study he gave me. 31 Stanwick Road, West Kensington, England. 8th of November, 1912. Dear Mrs. Behrend, I think it best to write you a few lines regarding the proposed studies with me, as I should much regret if there were any misunderstanding and you should meet with any disappointment. I have studied the subject for a number of years, and have a general acquaintance with the leading features of most of the systems which, unfortunately, occupy attention in many quarters at the present time, such as Theosophy, the Tarot, the Kabbalah, and similar systems, and I have no hesitation in saying that, to the best of my judgment, all types and descriptions of so-called occult study are in direct opposition to the life-giving truth, and therefore you must not expect any teaching on lines like those. There is a good deal of talk in these days about initiation, but believe me, the more you try to become what is termed an initiate, the more you will fail to live the life. I speak after many years of careful study and consideration when I say that the Bible and its revelation of Christ is the only thing really worth studying, and that it is a subject quite large enough in all conscience, embracing our outward life and daily concerns, and also the inward springs of our life and all we can generally conceive of life in the unseen after leaving the body at death. You have expressed a very high degree of confidence in my teaching, and if your confidence is such that you wish, as you say, to put yourself entirely under my guidance, I can only accept it as a very serious responsibility, and I must ask you to evidence that confidence by refusing to look into those so-called mysteries, which I should forbid you to look at. I am speaking from experience, but the result will be that most of my teaching will appear to be very simple, perhaps to some extent dogmatic, and you will say that you have heard much of it before. Faith in God, prayer, and devotion, approaching the Father by means of Christ, all this is to some extent familiar to you, and all I can hope to do is perhaps to throw a little more light on these subjects, which may cause them to become to you not merely traditional words, but present facts of life. I have been quite explicit, as I do not want you to have any disappointment, and I must also say that our so-called course of study will be only friendly conversations on such occasions as we can fit them in, whether you come to our house or I to yours, as may prove most convenient at the time. Further, I shall lend you a few books which will be of use, but they are very few and in no sense occult. Now, if all this fits in with your ideas, we shall, I am sure, be very pleased to see you at Ruin Manor, and you will find that the residents here, though few, are very friendly and the neighborhood is very beautiful. But, on the other hand, if you feel that you want some other source of learning, I do not mind your saying so, only you will never find any substitute for Christ. I trust you will not mind my having written to you in this way, but I do not want you to come all the way to Cornwall and afterward feel disappointed. With kind regards, yours sincerely, signed, Troward. I believe this copy of Troward's letter is the best thing I can give you. Chapter 11. How to put the power of your word into action. In every word you use, there is a germ of power that expands and projects itself in the direction which your word indicates, and ultimately becomes physical expression. For instance, you desire to establish joy in your consciousness. Repeat the word joy secretly, persistently, and emphatically. The repetition of the word joy establishes a quality of vibration that causes the germ of joy to begin to expand and project itself until your whole being is filled with joy. This is not a mere fancy, but a truth. Once you experience this power, you will daily demonstrate to yourself that these facts have not been fabricated to fit a theory, but that the theory has been constructed by careful observation of the facts. Everyone knows that joy comes from within. No one can give it to you. Another may give you a motive for joy, but no one can be happy for you. Joy is a state of consciousness, and consciousness is purely mental. Troward says that the mental faculties are always working under some stimulus, and this stimulus may be derived either from without, through the external senses, or from within, by the consciousness of something which is not perceptible on the physical plane. The recognition of this inner source of stimulus enables you to bring into your consciousness any state you desire. Once a thing is normal to you, it is certainly yours through the law of growth and attraction, just as it is yours to know addition after you have learned the use of numbers. This method of word repetition makes the word yours in all its unlimited meanings, because words are the embodiment of thoughts, and thought is creative, neither good nor bad, simply creative. This is why faith builds and fear destroys. Only believe, and all things will be possible to you. It is faith that gives you dominion over every adverse circumstance or condition. It is your word of faith that makes you free. Not faith in some specific thing or act, but simple faith in your best self in every respect. It is this ever-present creative power within the heart of the Word that makes your health, your peace of mind, and your financial condition a reproduction of your most habitual thought. Try to believe and understand this, and you will be the master of every adverse circumstance or condition, a prince of power. Chapter 12. How to increase your faith. But you ask, how can I speak the word of faith when I have little or no faith? Every living soul has faith in something or someone. It is the quality of the creative energy in the thought of faith that gives vitality, not the form it takes. Even intense fear is alive with faith. You are afraid of smallpox because you believe it is possible for you to contract it. You are afraid of poverty and loneliness because you believe it is possible for you. It is the faith which understands that every creation had its birth in the womb of the thought word that gives you dominion over all things, including your lower self. And this feeling of faith increases and intensifies by observing what it does. This observation is the observation of your state of consciousness when you did, not when you hoped to do, but feared it was too good to be true. How did you feel at that moment when you merely brought yourself into a better frame of mind, or wanted a certain thing and got it? Relive these experiences again and again, mentally, until you actually feel yourself in touch with the self that knows and does, and then the best there is yours. Chapter 13. The Reward of Increasing Faith. Because you have increased your faith and in the laws of the universe, which know no failure, your faith in your better self, the life principle in you, has led you to the conscious realization that you are not a victim of the universe, but a part of it. Consequently, you are enabled to recognize that within yourself there exists that which is capable of making conscious contact with the universal law, and enables you to press all particular laws of nature, visible or invisible, into the service of your particular demand or desire, and in this way you see that you are master, not slave, of any situation. Troward tells us that this mastery is obtained by knowledge, and the only knowledge which enables us to attain this purpose in all its immeasurable vastness is the knowledge of the personal element in the universal spirit, and its reciprocity with our own personality. In other words, the words you think, the personality you feel yourself to be, are all miniature reproductions of God or universal spirit specialized. All the words of your thoughts were God's word forms before they were yours. The words you use are the instruments, the channels through which creative energy takes form. Naturally, this sentient creative power can only reproduce itself in accordance with the instrument through which it passes. All disappointments and failures are the result of trying to think one thing and producing another. This is as impossible as it would be for an electric fan to be used for lighting purposes, or for water to flow in a straight line through a crooked pipe. The water must take the form of the pipe through which it flows. Even more truly must this sentient, invisible substance reproduce in the outer the form of the thought word through which it passes. This is the law of its nature. Therefore, logically, as a man thinketh, so is he. Therefore, when your thought or word form is in correspondence with the eternal constructive and progressive movement of the universal law, then your mind is the mirror in which the infinite power and intelligence of the universe see themselves reproduced, and your individual life becomes one of harmony. Chapter 14. How to make nature respond. You must constantly bear in mind that there is one intelligence and power throughout all nature and all space, that is always creative and infinitely sentient and responsive. The sensitive nature of it is twofold. It is creative and susceptible to suggestion. Once the human understanding grasps this all-important fact, one realizes the simplicity with which the law of life supplies one's every demand. All that is necessary is to realize that your mind is a center of divine operation, and consequently contains within itself that which accepts suggestion, and to expect all life to answer your call. Then you will find suggestions tending toward the fulfillment of your desire coming to you, not only from your fellow human beings, but also from the flowers, the grass, the trees, and the stones, which will enable you to fulfill your heart's desire, if you act upon them with confidence on this physical plane. Faith without works is dead, but faith with works makes you absolutely free. Chapter 15. Faith with Works, What It Has Accomplished. It is said of Tyson, the great Australian millionaire, that the idea of making the Australian desert blossom as the rose came to him from a tiny, modest Australian violet while he was working as a gardener for something like 3 shillings a day. He was accustomed to finding these friendly little violets growing in certain places in the bush, and something in the flower touched something akin to itself in Tyson's mind. He would sit on the side of his bed at night and wonder how the flowers and the plant life could be given a chance to express themselves in the Australian desert. No doubt, he realized that it would take him a long time to save sufficient money to put irrigation ditches into the desert lands. But his thought and feeling assured him that it could be brought about, and if it could be done, he could do it. If there was a power within himself which was capable of capturing the idea, then there must be a responsive power within the idea itself which could bring it into practical physical manifestation. He resolutely laid aside all questions as to the specific means to be employed to bring his desire into physical manifestation, and simply held his thought centered upon the idea of fencing and seeing flowers and grass where none existed at the time. Since the sensibility of the creative reproductive power is not limited by any local condition of mind, his habitual meditation and mental picture left his ideas free to wander in infinity, and to attract to themselves other ideas of a kindred nature. Therefore, it was not necessary for Tyson to wait until he saved from his 3 shillings a day money enough to irrigate the land, in order to see his ideas and desires fulfilled, because his ideas found other ideas in the financial world that were tuned in affinity with themselves, and the doors of finance were quickly opened. All charitable institutions are maintained upon the principle of the responsiveness of life. If this were not true, no one would care to give simply because another needs. The law of supply and demand, cause and effect, can never be broken. Ideas attract to themselves kindred ideas. Sometimes they come from a flower, a book, or from the unseen. You are sitting or walking, holding an idea not very complete as to the ways and means of fulfillment. And lo, there comes another idea, which no one can tell where it came from, and finds a friendly affinity with your idea. One idea attracts another, and so on until your desires are made physical. You may feel the need of an increase in your finances, and wonder how this increase will be brought about, when suddenly there comes from within the idea that everything has its birth in thought, even money, and your thoughts change their course. You have only to hold the statement or affirmation that the best and all there is yours. Since you are capable of catching ideas from the infinite through the instrument of your intuition, let your mind rest in that thought, knowing perfectly well that that very thought will answer itself. The inhibition of all doubt and anxiety allows encouraging ideas to establish themselves and attract to themselves the I can and I will ideas, which gradually grow into the physical form of the desire in mind. In the conscious use of universal power to reproduce your desires in physical form, 3 facts must be kept in mind. 1. All space is filled with a creative power. 2. This creative power is susceptible to suggestion. 3. It can only work by deductive methods. As Troward tells us, this last is an extremely important point, as it implies that the action of the ever-present creative power is not in any way limited by precedent. It works according to the essence of the spirit of the principle. In other words, this universal power takes its creative direction from the word you give it. Once man realizes this great truth, the character with which this sensitive reproductive power is invested becomes the most important of all his considerations. It is the unvarying law of the creative life principle that, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. If you realize the truth that the creative power can be to you only what you feel and think it to be, it is willing and able to satisfy your demands. Troward says, "If you think your thought is powerful, your thought is powerful. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he," is the law of life. And the creative power cannot change this law any more than a common mirror can reflect back to you a different image from the object held before it. As you think, so are you, does not mean as you tell people you think, or as you would like the world to believe you think. It means your innermost thoughts, that place where no one but you knows. No one can know the Father save the Son, and no one can know the Son save the Father. Only the reproductive, creative spirit of life knows what you think until your thoughts become physical facts and manifest themselves in your body, your brain, or your affairs. Then everyone with whom you come in contact can know, because the Father, the intelligent creative energy that hears your most secret thoughts in silence, rewards you openly by reproducing your thoughts in physical form. As you think into that you will grow, must be kept in the background of your mind constantly. This is praying without ceasing, and when you do not feel quite up to par physically, pray. To Chapter 16. Suggestions on how to ask believing you have received scientific thought, positive thinking, suggestions for practical application. Try, by careful, positive, earnest, though not strenuous thought, to realize that the indescribable, invisible substance of life fills all space, that its nature is intelligent, undifferentiated substance. 5 o'clock in the morning is the best time to enter into this kind of meditation. If you go to bed early every night for a month and before sleeping, firmly impress upon your subjective mind the affirmation, "My Father is the ruler of all the world and is expressing His directed power through me." You will find that the substance of life takes form in the molds of your thought. Do not accept the above suggestion merely because it has been given to you. Think it over carefully until the impression is comprehensively made upon your own subconscious mind. Rise every morning, as before suggested, at 5 o'clock. Sit in a quiet room in a straight-backed chair and think over the affirmation of the previous night, and you will be enabled to put your Prince power into practice with the realization to some extent, at least, that your mind is truly a center through which all the creative energy and power that exists is taking form. Scientific prayer. The underlying principle of scientific prayer. In praying for a change in physical, mental, or financial condition for self or another, you must bear in mind that the fundamental requisite for the answer to prayer is the understanding of the scientific declaration. Ask, believing that ye have received, and ye shall receive. This is not so difficult as it appears on the surface, once you realize that everything has its origin in mind, and that which you seek on the exterior you already possess. No one can think a thought in the future. Your thought of a thing constitutes its origin. Therefore, the thought form of the thing is yours as soon as you think it. Your constant recognition of this possession thought causes the thought to concentrate, condense, project itself, and assume physical form. Getting rich through creation. The recognition or conception of new sources of wealth is the highest aspiration you can hold in your heart, for it presupposes and implies the attainment of all noble aims. Points to be remembered in praying for self or another. Remember that what you term treatment or prayer is not, in any sense, hypnotism, and it should never be your effort to take possession of the mind of another. Remember that it should never be your intention to make yourself believe that which you know is not true. You are simply thinking God, or the first cause, with the understanding that if a thing is true, there is a way in which it is true throughout the entire universe. Remember that the power of thought works absolutely by scientific principles. These principles are expressed in the language of the declaration. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. This declaration contains a world of wisdom, the constant recognition of which, and the careful application of the declaration itself is necessary to bring it into practical use. Remember that the principles involved in being as we believe in our heart are clarified and revealed by the law. As you sow, so shall you reap. Remember that your freedom to choose exactly what you shall think, the possession of what thought you will affirm and demand, constitute a gift of God to you. It shows how the first cause has endowed every man with the power and ability to bring into his personal environment whatever he desires. Cause and effect in reference to having. If you plant an acorn, you get an oak tree. If you sow a grain of corn, you reap a stalk and many kernels of corn. You always get the manifestation of that which you consciously or unconsciously affirm and claim, which you habitually declare and expect, or, in other words, that which you sow. Therefore, sow the seeds of I am, I ought to do, I can do, I will do. This accounts for, because you are, you ought to do. Because you ought to do, you can do. Because you can do, you do it. The manifestation of this truth, even in a small degree, gives you the indisputable comprehension that dominion is your right. You are an heir of the first cause, endowed with all the power it has. God has given you everything. Everything is yours, and you know that all you have to do is lift up your mental hand and take it. This formula may serve as a model for forming your own prayer or affirmation in God for the benefit of another or yourself. If it is for another, speak the first name of the person you desire to help. Then cast the personality of the person entirely out of your consciousness. Intensify your thought by meditating upon the fact that there is that something in you that finds the way, which is the truth and is the life. You are affirming this fact in the belief that if you are thinking it, it is already yours. After you have elevated your feeling to the central idea of this meditation, examine your own consciousness and see if there is anything that is unlike God. If there is any feeling of fear, worry, malice, envy, hatred, jealousy, return in your meditation to cleanse your thought through the affirmation that the love and purity of God fill all space, including your heart and soul. Reconcile your thought to the love of God, always remembering that you are made in the image and likeness of love. Hold this cleansing of thought in mind until you feel that you have released your entire consciousness of all thoughts and feelings other than love and unity with all mankind. Then, if denials do not bother you, deny everything that is unlike your desired manifestation. This done, cover your denial with the affirmative thought that you are made in the image and likeness of God, and already have your desire fulfilled in its initial, spiritual original or thought form. Closing the prayer. Prayer as a method of thought is a deliberate use of the law which gives you the power of dominion over everything that tends, in any way, to hinder your perfect freedom. Life was given you that you might enjoy more and more fully. The continuous recognition of this truth makes you declare yourself a prince of power. You recognize, accept, and use this power as the child of a king, and therefore dominion is your birthright. Then, when you feel that the light of this great truth has flooded your consciousness, open the floodgates of your soul in sincere praise, because you have the understanding that the Creator and its creation are one. Also, that the Creator is continuously creating through its creation. Close your treatment in the happy assurance that fulfilled. Prayer is not a form of supplication, but a constant habitual affirmation that the Creator of all creation is operating specifically through you, therefore the work must be perfectly done. Your mind is a center of divine operation. Suggestions for application and practice. For every 5 minutes given to the reading and study of mental science theories, spend 15 minutes in the use and application of the acquired knowledge. Spend 1 minute out of every 24 hours to thoughtfully dwell on the specifications which must be observed in order for your prayers to be answered. Practice the constant recognition of desirable thought for 2 15-minute periods each day. Not only take the time at each period to see how long you can hold a given conception before your mental vision, but also keep a written record of the intensity with which you experience your mental picture. Remember that your mental senses are as varied and trainable as your physical ones. Spend 5 minutes every day between 12 noon and 1 p.m. with a mental searching for new sources of wealth. Chapter 17. Things you must remember. Remember that the greatest mental scientist the world has ever known, Jesus Christ the man, said that all things are possible to you. He also said, "The things that I do, you shall do." Did he speak the truth? Jesus did not claim to be any more divine than you are. He declared the entire human race to be children of God. By birth, he was no exception to this rule. The power that he possessed was developed through his personal effort. He said that you could do the same thing if you only believed in yourself. A great idea is worthless if not followed by physical action. God gives the idea. Man works it out on the physical plane. All that is really worthwhile is joy. Self-mastery can produce it. Soul and body are one. Joy of mind is joy of soul, and joy of soul means joy of body. If you desire health, watch your thoughts, not only of your physical self, but your thoughts about everything and everyone. By your will, hold them in line with your desire, and act on the exterior in accordance with your thoughts, and you will soon realize that all power both over thoughts and conditions has been given to you. You believe in God. Believe in yourself as the physical instrument through which God operates. Absolute dominion is yours when you have sufficient self-mastery to overcome the negative tendency of thoughts and actions. Daily, ask yourself the following questions. What is the purpose of the power that put me here? How can I work with the purpose for life and freedom in me? Having decided these questions, strive every hour to fulfill them. You are a law unto yourself. If you have a tendency to excess in anything, whether eating, drinking, or blaming circumstances for your misfortunes, master that tendency with the inner conviction that all power is yours. Eat less, drink less, blame circumstances less, and the best there is will gradually grow into the place where the worst seem to be. Remember always that everything is yours to use as you desire. You can if you will. If you will, you do. God the Father blesses you with all that He has to give. Make a good divine use of it. The reason for a greater success. When you first began your studies and demonstrations of mental science, was that your joy and enthusiasm in the simple discovery of the inner power was greater than you could put into your later understanding. With greater understanding, put greater joy and enthusiasm, and the results will correspond. Some stories. 1. One morning, after class, a man approached me and asked if I could speak the word for him so that he might obtain supplies, as he was in great need of money. He offered me a $5 bill with the following remark. "Dear Madam, this is half of all the money I have in the world. I am deeply in debt. My wife and child do not even have proper clothing. I must have money." I explained to him that money is but the symbol of differentiated substance, that this substance fills all space, that it was present with him at that very moment, and would manifest itself to him as the money he needed. But, he questioned, it might come too late. I told him it could not come too late, for it is eternally present. He understood and carried with him the enthusiasm of my spoken word. I did not see the man again, but 6 months later I received a letter from him saying he was now in New Orleans. He wrote, "I am now well established here in my regular profession as a photographer. I own my own house and automobile, and I am prospering in every way. Dear Mrs. Behrend, I want to thank you for lifting me from the depths that day in New York. 3 days after speaking with you, I met on the street a man whom I had not seen for years. When I told him of my situation, he loaned me the money to pay my debts and to come here. The enclosed check is to help you continue the wonderful work of teaching people how they may mentally reach and receive their inexhaustible supply. I would have gained no understanding had you not given it to me. God bless you." 2. A woman came to me in New York City asking for help, as she was without work. I spoke the word of the ever-present supply for her, and strengthened it mentally by seeing her in the position she dreamed of, though she had not been able to make it a practical reality. That same afternoon, she telephoned me, saying she could hardly believe her senses, for she had just obtained exactly the kind of position she wanted. The employer told her that he had been looking for a woman like her for months. 3. A woman asked me for help in bringing her husband back to her. She said she felt very unhappy and lonely without him and longed to be reunited. I told her she could not lose love or protection, since both belonged to her. She asked what she should do to have her husband return. I told her to follow the great power of intuition and to think of her husband as perfectly free, holding in mind the image of all that a husband should be. She went away very happy, but returned a few days later to tell me that her husband wanted a divorce to marry another woman. She was greatly upset and had evidently relaxed her will in following the previous instructions. Once again, I told her to keep constantly in her mind that the loving protection of the Spirit of Life was guiding her toward perfect happiness. A month later, she came again and said that her husband had married the other woman. This time, she had completely lost her mental control. I repeated the words for her as before, and she regained her balance. 2 months later, she returned, full of joy. Her husband had come back to her, begging forgiveness and telling her he had made a terrible mistake, for he could not be happy without her. They are now living together happily, and she, at least, learned the necessity of holding her desire firmly in place through the use of her will. 4. A lady came seeking help in selling a piece of property. After I had explained to her how to form a mental picture of the sale, mentally reviewing all the details exactly as if the property had been sold, she came back a week later to tell me that one day, while walking down the street, she suddenly had the thought to go and see a certain real estate man with whom she had not yet spoken. She hesitated at first, as it seemed to her that this man could not possibly sell her property. However, recalling the strength of what I had told her, she followed the idea and went to the real estate agent. He sold the property for her in just 3 days after she first approached him. This was simply following the natural law of supply and demand. 5. A man came to me in great despair, saying that he was about to lose his home in the South. In his own words, it was mortgaged to the limit, and his creditors were about to foreclose. It was the house in which he had been born and raised, and the thought of losing it filled his heart and mind with pain, not only from a financial point of view but also from sentiment. I explained to him that the power which had brought him into existence did so with the purpose of expressing its unlimited supply through him, that there was no power on earth that could cut him off from his source except his own consciousness, and that, in reality, even he could not truly cut it off. I told him that he already had it, but was unable to recognize it as being there, and I said to him, "The infinite substance is manifesting in you at this very moment." The following Sunday, just before leaving my dressing room at the Selwyn Theater to deliver my afternoon lecture, I received the following note. "Dear Mrs. Behrend, I want you to know that I am the happiest man in all New York City. My home in the South is safe. The money came in the most miraculous way, and I have telegraphed enough to pay off the mortgage. Please tell the people this afternoon about this wonderful power." 6. A man in the hardware business in New Jersey came to me in great distress. He said he would have to go bankrupt unless something happened within 15 days. He told me he had never heard of visualization. I explained to him how to make a mental picture of his business improving more and more, instead of holding the image of losing it. About a month later, he came back very happy and told me that he had succeeded. He said, "All my debts are paid, and my store is filled with new supplies." His business was then on a solid foundation. It was beautiful to see his faith. 7. One of the doormen in the building where I lived had heard much talk about mental imagery and visualization from visitors passing outside my rooms. The average desire was for $500. He considered that $5 was more in his line, and began to visualize that amount, without the slightest idea of where or how he would get it. One day my parrot flew out the window, and I telephoned the men in the yard to bring it back to me. One man caught it, but the bird bit his finger. The doorman, who was wearing gloves and had no fear of being bitten, caught it and brought it to me. I gave him 5 $1 bills for his service. This sudden reward surprised him. With great excitement, he told me that he had been visualizing exactly $5, simply from hearing others talk about visualization. He was delighted with the unexpected realization of his mental image. Thank you for listening to this audiobook until the end. If you enjoyed the content, we invite you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This way, you won't miss our upcoming publications.